My fiancée slept with her ex, so I slept with her greatest enemies to get back at her. I'm 32 years old and work for a large finance organization. I'm performing well and have opportunities for advancement. I had a terrific time speaking with the woman next to me during a conference 6 years ago. We spent the following several months dating and have been together ever since. She turned 30 a few days ago, but given how things turned out, there was no reason to contact her to wish her well. I asked her to marry me on her 29th birthday, and she said yes immediately. That makes me grin since it was one of the most memorable days of our life. Things became a lot worse. Now aged, like milk put out to age. Regardless, she accepted my marriage proposal, and we planned to marry. Fun times, right? Maybe I'm the only one, but ladies who are too hesitant to tell their friends about their sexual experiences may look to you as a companion. I've had this in both this and the previous 2 relationships. I believe most men don't want to know who their girlfriend, fiancé, or wife has slept with. When I have sex with a lady, I don't treat her differently. I told her I didn't want to hear her stories anymore after a few times, despite knowing a lot about her most recent ex. Hearing about ex-spouses getting acquainted with new people is okay. But please don't get physical. Chris was difficult to get along with, but he was excellent in bed. We had slept together and it made me question whether I was truly that good in bed. Perhaps fewer OS for me. Problems in the bedroom kept her in a poor mood. I had my reservations, but she was younger and less intelligent than me. I ignored it. This is critical knowledge for what I'm going to say. At first I heard a lot about Chris, but then nothing else. I assumed she was over him at that time, which was great with me. I hadn't heard much about him after 2 years. Now we'll come to the part after the engagement. Sandy, my fiancée, and I were making arrangements. We both come from good families. People have told me I'm out of touch, so my perspective may not be accurate, even if I wouldn't say my childhood was prosperous. Both ways. The parents had high hopes for something significant. It was wonderful among family and friends. There were no aunts or relatives I hadn't seen since I was a kid, but Sandy and everyone else wanted things to go smoothly. I let them win, and then gave up. Now the fun begins. Yes, here is where I messed up. But I'm trying to make a comedy out of it now. There were many gorgeous spots to select from, including a private beach, a 10,000-year-old cathedral, city hall, and so on. Fortunately, I stated I could find an event space in the city, but I was informed I lacked vision. I wouldn't fret over things that don't important. Sandy informed me that she was going to 3 places with a buddy, which was great with me. Anything you do not like. She and a companion sought for huge, bright outfits and catered festivities. After the day, she informed me that she and her buddy visited a few locations and particularly enjoyed an old church. She intended to see the same acquaintance again in a few days to ensure she felt the same way. I assured her that was all right because I was no longer concerned about the setting. In this example, I found nothing incorrect. Finally, she and her buddy returned to look at the place and thought it was ideal for her. We had to pay a fee within 30 days to reserve the day. Finally, I set the stage. Following then, everything proceeded smoothly for several weeks. We didn't spend a lot of money on wedding plans, but much was accomplished. I was fortunate that my wife had left her phone on the kitchen island when she signed for the box. From whence did I receive the message? Hello, Chris, sweetheart. I wanted to read her messages, but she immediately returned with the present she'd purchased. I wasn't sure whether it was the same Chris who called her babe. In some respects, I believe it would be worse. It must be her ex. I understood how to deal with my feelings because I understand how males are. He may be an ex who makes demands or uses sexual slurs and pet names. She could disagree with it. If she didn't know I knew, I could not wait to read more. After 10 days, her buddy picked her up, providing her the opportunity. Check out the floral patterns. She'd forgotten her phone, which was a good thing. She might return with her phone, but I would not pass up the opportunity. I took it and searched for Chris in her chat app. They spoke. They spoke a lot. There was chat about the wedding and other typical topics. Aside from wedding details, he stated we should return to the location because it was so gorgeous. I noticed he was with her. It now occurred to me that she had not named me. As usual, she did. She accompanied Chris, her ex-boyfriend, who was so fantastic in bed. But we hadn't spoken in years. This made me want to read more. Up to the good part. Lots of texting. Plenty. As explicit as possible. There were few photos, but the most of the content was written. I had to go a great distance to get there, but they were back at the old church by that time. After then, everything was good except for the pet names. I am not sure if they slept together. Because they were still conversing, she didn't feel horrible about what they did. She always kept the idiot's phone number ready. The door then became loose. I considered taking her phone away. I considered acting as if I wasn't doing anything, but what? I gave up on it. She was able to enter with her phone. Her eyes widened as soon as we touched, and she nearly sprinted towards me to inquire, "What are you doing?" as she joined me. When she noticed Chris on the phone, I looked up at her from where I was seated. She had difficulty speaking. She attempted to make her lips move. "Did you check my phone?" "Really? Do you mean this?" "Yes," I responded. She attempted to make me appear awful. I was upset over the comment, but I laughed it off. She moved away, which may have made me appear insane. I have no clue at all. I had no idea, I informed her. "When you signed for the package yesterday, your lover left a note. I examined your phone after receiving the message. Do not argue with me, I did this for a purpose. If things had gone your way, I would never have suspected you were cheating on me with Chris." She began to mutter and explain that things wasn't as it looked. "I know you guys slept together," I bluffed hard, but I just had a gut feeling. She denied it immediately away. But I stayed firm and told her. I urged her, "Stop lying," and shoved her phone toward her. "I can't marry a liar," she sobbed, adding, "Just once." I laughed again. "Just once you'd had sex with him. You are still in touch with him." "It was a mistake. Baby, I made one." She continued to attempt to touch me, but I swatted her away. That sentence made me giggle since it was just a mistake because I caught her. She would have gone along with me and her ex-boyfriend. There was a chance she would have married me and continued to sleep with him. It was terrifying to consider how awful things may have become if I hadn't discovered this. I had no idea, and I had entirely trusted her before seeing the message on her phone. It gets me upset simply thinking about it right now. I got up, walked to the bedroom, and took her luggage from the closet. She followed me and began weeping again when she saw me putting her belongings in it, which made me even angrier. She continued pleading me. It was absurd to think that I was arranging a wedding with her. "Return my call." Her expression was as if she'd seen a ghost. I believe it was the moment she recognized how terribly she had messed up and what the true implications of her actions were. My hand was outstretched in front of her for almost 2 minutes before she removed the ring and placed it in my hand. She didn't even resist it, which pleased me because I was growing antsy at the time. I placed some of her belongings in the bag and ordered her to depart quietly, which she did. That night, I shut the door. I turned out the lights and drank. When I awoke the next morning, I'd missed numerous phone calls, including those from her parents, my parents, and others. She must have informed them that I had canceled the wedding, but I wondered whether she had explained why. Almost definitely not. I reasoned at the time. I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone since all they said was how sad they were for me, or how well Sandy and I got along. I did not want to have to cope with any of those situations. People knocked on my door multiple times during the day, but I remained silent the entire time, and they departed. The next day, I put up a group chat and included both sets of parents, Sandy's siblings, and myself. I typed a lengthy message, going into as much detail as I felt like at the moment. It didn't matter if she or my parents were present, they needed to know where I was coming from if they were to have any say in the soon-to-be-cancelled wedding. So yes, I told them everything. It was exhausting going over everything, but I did it. The group conversation remained silent for an hour. After that, I noticed that several of them, including my ex-fiancée, had read it. The first indication that someone had truly understood was when my father phoned me. I recall precisely what he said. "Son, I'm sorry. Someone told me you made the right choice, it will hurt. But it was the right choice that resonated with me because a weaker guy could have gone back to throwing up when the pain became too intense. But I never considered it." Whenever I thought about that statement during the day, I received calls and messages. I responded to some of them, while I disregarded others. Everyone had clearly understood the message. There was no use in discussing the news with me because my mind had already been made up. That was the last time we talked about our wedding preparations, and to my knowledge, her parents never tried to persuade me since I felt they had the foresight to see their daughter had made a huge mistake. But it wasn't enough for me. It actually wasn't. I had to make Sandy feel the same way I felt, since canceling an engagement was not a true sorrow for her, it was simply the result of her choices. The first thing I wanted to do was confront Chris. But I couldn't figure out how because I had no actual JT on him. I hoped Sandy would avoid him because he was the source of all her shame and sorrow. After all, her close relatives knew she was an unfaithful hoe, so that was satisfying. It might have been helpful if I had come here to seek for advice on how to get back at Chris, but honestly, my mind was not in the proper place at the moment, and I hope you understand that. So, despite my reservations, I let him leave. However, the true person I needed to get back at was Sandy, and I had a strategy. Here is the issue: we weren't. At this point, I could sleep with anyone, including her sister. Sorry, I didn't intend to, I was only making a point. I wanted to make sure it hurt her severely. I could either sleep with the individual she loves or dislikes the most. If our relationship had failed, all of her closest friends would have known, and it would have been difficult for me to deal with. But the individual she despises would be a different type of evil. If you're reading this, consider how you'd feel if your partner slept with that unpleasant man at work that you despise. It would increase your hatred for him, but it would also cause you great pain. I had to go. I attempted to recall the names of certain female Kia workers that my wife had frequently complained about. At the top of the list was Sophia, whom she despised because she felt she was everything, which was probably girl speak for feeling intimidated by her. I was eager to find out whether this meant she was hot. There was also Melissa, a college classmate. They used to be friends, then Melissa slept with one of my ex-fiancé's ex-partners, resulting in a massive argument, and Sandy has loathed her ever since. Finally, I could recall Toki, a Japanese girl. Sandy added, I hate her because she acts so cute and men drool over her like fools. My list included a few more names, but I either couldn't do enough research to discover them online or couldn't find them at all. Sophia was easy to discover because she works at the same place as me, which made LinkedIn quite useful. From there, I found her Instagram account and messaged her. I use Instagram a lot, and I'm not trying to brag, but it's a really enticing website for those who enjoy slightly expensive lifestyles. I wore a lot of interesting clothing, my Audi appeared a few times, and I mentioned a couple vacations I'd gone. When I followed Sophia, she followed me back within minutes, and I messaged her. I used my typical smooth banter, and it was evident she liked me. We chatted for another day, and she agreed to a date. I took numerous shots of her and with her, and I made sure she looked amazing in each one. Melissa was the next person. At this time, I was aware that I was going to go to great lengths to get retribution, but I was determined. Melissa resided 2 states away, yet I still messaged her on Instagram. The difficulty was that she identified me, something I had not anticipated. My wife and Melissa hadn't communicated, but Melissa must have periodically checked in on her life out of spite, because I appeared on my wife's social media pages. I was caught out, so I went the honest route. I informed Melissa I had ended my relationship with Sandy, and she responded, "Good, I hated her." The following message stated, "Oh, I'm sorry, I know you must still love her." I told Melissa I didn't, and I was seeking for someone to share my disdain with. She began a phone conversation with me immediately following that message. We chatted about my ex-fiancé, and I told Melissa I want to get back at her. Melissa, who was obviously a serial homewrecker, responded, "You could sleep with me at this point." I could see why Sandy despised her back then, but it worked out for me. Setting up the date was simple. I traveled out on a weekend, and Melissa and I went bowling and touring in her city, where I snapped several photographs for my secret objectives. We then went to her place and had a nice time, and she even allowed me to shoot some extremely suggestive photos of her. Apparently their hatred was more intense than I had imagined. Finally, it was time for Toki. I was fortunate to locate her on Tinder. I had no idea what she looked like, and the name Toki was uncommon where I lived, so I wrote her a message immediately. It took 3 dates for anything to happen, but I had my photos shot with her permission. It took precisely 6 weeks to do all of this, and I'm not going to lie, I truly considered myself a psychopath for going to all of that work to retaliate against someone, but I knew I'd feel a lot better at the end, so I ignored those ideas. I texted Sandy unexpectedly one day, and it took her a long time to respond, but she did. We made some awkward small conversation, and I told her I wanted to meet up but didn't specify what. I told her we had to meet in 3 hours just to keep her wondering. No, we weren't getting back together, but she probably believed we were. Finally, the moment had come, and I met her in a park. She arrived before I did, which was not surprising given how slowly I had gotten dressed. She arose to embrace me, and I accepted. It was simpler to raise her hopes if I wasn't too chilly. We exchanged some bland niceties before I got out my phone and gave her a load of media. I instructed her to look at them. The first face she saw was Sophia, and she questioned, "Why are you showing me this?" Before I could respond, she scrolled to the. I casually mentioned to her that she was a lot of fun to be around, but tears welled up in her eyes as she continued to gaze. Then she noticed Melissa. The first video shows me bowling with Melissa, followed by the more graphic one. She watched the movie loop 3 times before I informed her. None of these women were as bad as you made them seem. In fact, they were all a lot better than you, especially where it mattered the most. She burst into tears. She stood up and began hurling obscenities at me. She continued pointing her finger at me fiercely, and I worried whether she was about to beat me. However, she continued to yell and point her finger at me. I wasn't paying attention since I was enjoying the way she shook in rage. She added, "You made it seem like you're a saint, but you're worse than me." I stopped her and told her, "Really, you can only be mad at yourself, Sandy. This is just what you deserve." She started crying again, this time looking really shattered. That was enough for me. Seeing that expression was enough. I completed what I needed to do and felt accomplished. I haven't heard from her since, not even when she turned 30, and to be honest, I prefer it that way. I'm not sure whether this is valuable advice to anyone, but I don't believe any lady is beyond cheating. That's what I assumed about my ex-fiancée, and I was mistaken. If you can sign a prenuptial agreement, please do so, since I was fortunate to be able to leave my circumstances before being married. This is all I have to say. Always be on the alert. If you need to check their phone, do it, especially if you have cause to suspect they are cheating on you. It is hardly worth living with someone who makes you doubt your trustworthiness. I got out of my circumstance, and I hope all of you younger and older men do as well. In the first place, your response to learning of your fiancé's infidelity is both startling and weirdly humorous. Most people would have been upset, yet you laughed it off as if it was just another. Then your vengeance plot takes off, and it's something else. I mean, hitting on 3 women your ex-girlfriend despises is the ultimate form of retaliation. You know the saying, keep friends close and foes closer. What do you think of the AITA's retribution plans? Please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and remember to like, subscribe, and click the bell to ensure you don't miss our next video. Until then.